paid to break you. The envelope was crisp white against the mahogany conference table. Inside, a cashier's check for $5 million and a contract that made my stomach drop. $10 million total, Victoria Sterling said, her manicured fingers drumming once against the leather portfolio. 5 now, 5 when it's done. Simple terms: seduce my son, make him fall completely, then destroy him. One clean break that'll cure him of love forever. I stared at the check. More money than I'd see in a decade of secretarial work. More than enough to finally stop checking my bank balance before buying groceries. Why me? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Because you already did it once. Her smile was winter sharp. 3 days ago, you broke Alexander's heart so thoroughly he hasn't left his office since. But apparently not thoroughly enough. He's still moping instead of working. I need you to finish the job. The check seemed to pulse under the conference room lights. I thought of my studio apartment, my student loans, the way I'd been calculating whether I could afford both rent and heat this month. There's a non-compete clause, I said, surprising myself. If I take this money, I need assurance you won't claw it back. Victoria's eyebrow arched. Practical. I like that. The money becomes a gift the moment you sign irrevocable under New York law. My pen hovered over the signature line. Alexander's face flashed through my mind, the way he looked when I'd ended things. Like I'd physically struck him. But $10 million. I signed. Sterling Industries' 32nd floor buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, but I felt every eye track my movement toward Alexander's corner office. Word traveled fast in corporate towers, especially when the ex-girlfriend who'd quit dramatically on Monday was back on Thursday. Miss. Quick tongue. Alexander's assistant, Margaret, managed to pack 3 years of disapproval into my last name. Mr. Sterling isn't seeing anyone today. He'll see me. I pushed through the glass doors before she could object. Alexander sat behind his desk, still in yesterday's shirt if the wrinkles were any indication. His dark hair was disheveled, and coffee rings stained the contract he was reviewing. He looked up. Those storm gray eyes that used to soften when they found me stayed flat and cold. Ivy. My name sounded like a diagnosis. Come to retrieve something you forgot? The plan Victoria had outlined was simple. Be irresistible, make him need me, then vanish completely. But looking at him now at the careful distance he'd already built, I realized she was right about one thing. I hadn't broken him thoroughly enough the first time. I want to come back, I said. To what? He leaned back in his chair, studying me like a contract with suspicious terms. Your job? Because I seem to remember you calling it meaningless corporate theater before you stormed out. Heat crawled up my neck. I'd said that, and worse, during our breakup. All of it designed to create distance, to make him let me go. I was angry. Angry. He repeated the word like he was testing its weight. Not honest? This was the opening Victoria had prepared me for. I stepped closer to his desk, let my voice soften. Alex, I know I hurt you. But we both said things. I said I loved you. His words cut clean through my rehearsed vulnerability. You said I was a trust fund baby playing CEO while real people struggled. Which one of us was lying? The prepared script dissolved. This wasn't the heartbroken mess Victoria had described. This was Alexander Sterling at his sharpest, the man who'd turned his family's regional construction business into a national empire before 30. Neither, I said, choosing honesty over strategy. Both? Something flickered behind his professional mask. Elaborate. You do love me. And I do think you're isolated by wealth in ways you don't even see. I met his stare. But I lied about why that mattered to me. Why does it matter to you, Ivy? The question hung in the air between us. 3 days ago, I'd told him I couldn't build a life with someone whose quarterly earnings exceeded my lifetime salary. I'd made it about incompatibility, about different worlds. I hadn't told him about lying awake calculating how many years it would take me to contribute equally to a relationship. How every expensive dinner felt like charity. How loving him meant confronting my own insignificance every single day. Because I don't know how to be with someone I can't match, I said. The admission surprised us both. Alexander's pen stopped moving against his contract. And you think coming back here solves that? I think running away didn't. For a moment, the corporate performance dropped. He looked tired. Young. Like the man who'd brought me coffee in bed and listened to my anxious spirals about quarterly reports. Then his phone buzzed. Mr. Sterling? Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom. The Journal wants a comment on the Patterson merger. The walls snapped back up. Take a message. He stood, straightening his tie. Ivy, I have a company to run. If you want to discuss employment, HR is on 14. I want to discuss us. There is no us. He moved to the window, putting his back to me. You made that clear when you walked out. I could see his reflection in the glass, the careful blankness he wore when negotiations went badly. This was going to be harder than Victoria had predicted. What if I wanted to earn my way back? I asked. Into what? My bed? My company? My trust? He turned around. Because you'll need to be specific about which one you're applying for. The cruelty was surgical, precise enough to draw blood without leaving visible marks. This was why Victoria wanted him broken completely. He was too controlled, too defended to be destroyed by half measures. All three, I said. For the first time since I'd walked in, Alexander smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. Then I have some conditions. Public relations, Alexander said, sliding a thin folder across his desk. Starting Monday. I opened it to find an organizational chart with my name penciled into the bottom tier. Below 3 people I'd never heard of. In a department I had 0 experience with. This is a demotion. This is an opportunity. His tone suggested the conversation was over. Mrs. Patterson from HR will handle your paperwork. Alex, Mr. Sterling, he corrected. In the office. The formality stung more than the job reassignment. 3 months ago, I'd been his executive assistant, the gatekeeper who managed his calendar and filtered his calls. I'd had real authority, real access. Now I was being shuffled off to handle press releases about charity galas. What exactly am I supposed to prove in PR? That you can handle the consequences of your choices. He picked up his pen, already dismissing me. The Sterling name attracts attention, Ivy. Good and bad. If you want back into my life, you'll need to understand how to protect it. I thought of Victoria's contract, tucked safely in my apartment safe. How was I supposed to destroy him if he wouldn't let me close enough to inflict damage? Is less than #0. 6# is greater than, and if I succeed? He didn't look up from his contract. Then we'll discuss the next step. The PR department occupied a corner of the 28th floor that smelled like burned coffee and desperation. My new supervisor, Janet, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who greeted me with the enthusiasm of someone receiving a root canal. So, you're Sterling's ex. She didn't bother making it a question. Here to learn the family business from the ground up? Something like that. Janet's laugh was dry as sawdust. Honey, this job is about keeping other people's secrets buried and our people's stories spinning gold. You sure you want to learn what happens behind the curtain? Before I could answer, her phone exploded with calls. The receptionist's voice cut through the chaos. Janet, we have a problem. Celebrity scandal. Trending on Twitter. The client is asking for options. I watched Janet transform into a crisis machine, fielding calls, pulling up social media dashboards, sketching out response strategies on a whiteboard. Within 20 minutes, she'd outlined 3 approaches: deny, contextualize, or own the narrative. Deny's cheapest but highest risk if more comes out, she explained to the room. Own, it's most expensive, but gives us control. Contextualize is middle ground, we acknowledge without admitting fault. What's the cost differential? Someone asked. Deny runs about $50,000 if it holds. Own, it could hit $2 million in coordinated response campaigns. Contextualize sits around $300,000. I found myself leaning forward. What about the success metrics? Janet's eyes snapped to me. Excuse me? How do you measure whether it worked? Social sentiment? Client satisfaction? Future booking rates? A slow smile spread across her face. Maybe you'll survive here after all. By Friday, I understood why Alexander had sent me to PR. It wasn't punishment, it was education. Every crisis was a lesson in reading people, predicting reactions, and choosing which truth to tell when. When a gossip blogger got too close to a client's tax troubles, I watched Janet trade an exclusive interview about a charity project for burying the financial story. When a competitor tried to plant negative coverage, she flipped the attack into evidence of how much market share we'd captured. The goal isn't to eliminate problems, Janet told me during our Friday debrief. It's to control the narrative around them. That afternoon, her phone rang with the call I'd been dreading. Sterling Industries, she answered. Her face went carefully blank as she listened. When did this break? How widespread? Right. We'll handle it. She hung up and looked at me. Your ex-boyfriend just got photographed leaving a hotel with Madison Cross. Madison Cross? The pop star with 80 million Instagram followers and a reputation for dating billionaires. Scandal? I asked, proud of how level my voice sounded. Depends on how we play it. Janet was already pulling up media monitoring dashboards. Cross is smart. This could be good for both of them if we manage it right. But if it looks trashy, what are the options? Same as always. Deny, contextualize, or own it. She studied the early social media reaction. Deny won't work, the photos are clear. Own it means confirming they're dating, which could boost both their profiles. Contextualize means business meeting. I finished. They're discussing a partnership. Maybe she's performing at the Sterling Foundation Gala. Exactly. Keeps it professional while explaining the private venue. Janet nodded approvingly. What's your read on Sterling? How does he usually want these handled? The question hit me like cold water. 6 months ago, I'd have known exactly how Alexander wanted his personal life managed. Now, I had no idea if he was actually dating Madison Cross, or if this was some elaborate business meeting that got misread. I don't know, I admitted. Janet's expression softened slightly. That's honest. Most people would have guessed and gotten it wrong. She reached for her phone. I'll call him directly. You listen and learn. As she dialed Alexander's extension, I wondered if this was part of his test. See how I'd handle watching him linked to someone else. See if I'd get jealous, get careless, get vindictive. Or see if I'd do my job regardless of how it felt. The call connected. Mr. Sterling? We need to discuss the cross photos. Alexander wanted to own it. Confirm we're dating, his voice crackled through Janet's speakerphone. Madison's team agrees. They want to announce at tonight's Met Museum charity event. My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Janet glanced at me before responding. That's the highest cost option, sir. We're looking at coordinated campaigns across multiple platforms. Security costs for the event, media management, social monitoring. Probably $2 million minimum. Budget approved. Handle it. Sir, I found myself speaking before I could stop myself. Are you sure about the timing? The market's been volatile this week. A high-profile relationship announcement might draw unwanted attention to your personal holdings. Silence stretched across the line. Janet raised an eyebrow at me. Miss... Quick tongue. Alexander's voice was frost-cold. Are you questioning my business judgment? I'm asking if you've considered all the angles. Another pause. Then, schedule a meeting. 1 hour. My office. The line went dead. Janet whistled low. Either you just talked yourself out of a job, or you're about to get a very expensive education in crisis management. 58 minutes later, I knocked on Alexander's office door. Madison Cross was there, perched on his couch like she'd been poured into her designer dress. She was smaller in person, more fragile-looking, but her smile was megawatt bright. You must be the ex-girlfriend, she said, looking me up and down. Alex told me you were pretty. Alexander shot her a warning look. Madison, could you give us a moment? Sure, babe. She kissed his cheek before gliding out, trailing expensive perfume. Babe. The casual intimacy of it felt like a slap. Sit, Alexander said. I remained standing. Is this real or is this theater? Does it matter? For the PR strategy? Absolutely. Real relationships have different risk profiles than business arrangements. He studied me for a long moment. What would you recommend for each scenario? It was clearly a test, but I couldn't tell what answer he wanted. So I gave him the truth. If it's real, you announce tonight, but control the access. Exclusive interview with someone friendly, curated social media content, limited public appearances. Build the narrative but maintain privacy. And if it's theater? Then you're playing with fire. Business arrangements disguised as romance have a shelf life. When it ends, and it will end, someone always gets hurt. Usually publicly. Which do you think this is? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. I thought about Madison's casual affection, the way she'd called him babe, the practiced ease of their interaction. I think you're angry, I said. And I think she's ambitious. Whether that becomes real or stays business depends on how long you want to keep proving a point. Alexander's jaw tightened. What point would that be? That you don't need me. That you're fine without me. That walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. The admission slipped out before I could catch it. Alexander went very still. Is it? He asked quietly. Before I could answer, his office door burst open. Janet rushed in, phone in hand, face pale. We have a problem, she said. Someone leaked photos of Madison leaving through the hotel's service entrance. The narrative shifting from secret romance to billionaire's booty call. Her team is furious. Alexander was on his feet instantly. How bad? Bad enough that her publicist is threatening to throw you under the bus to save her image? We need a counter-narrative, and we need it now. I felt my mind shift into crisis mode. What if we flip it entirely? Both of them looked at me. Madison Cross doesn't sneak out of hotels. Madison Cross owns every room she enters. So why would she use the service exit unless she was protecting someone else's privacy? Whose privacy? Janet asked. A major business deal. Something so sensitive that normal security wasn't enough. I started pacing, the pieces clicking together. Madison's been wanting to launch her own fashion line. Sterling Industries has manufacturing connections in Southeast Asia. What if this wasn't about romance at all? What if it was about Alexander offering to help her build something real? Alexander's eyes sharpened. Business partnership instead of personal relationship. Exactly. She used the service exit to avoid photographers documenting confidential negotiations. The hotel meeting was about supply chains and licensing deals, not hookups. Janet was already pulling up her laptop. I can sell that. It repositions both of them as serious business people, not tabloid fodder. Will Madison's team buy it? Alexander asked. I thought about the woman I'd just met, ambitious, calculating, but not stupid. She gets to be seen as a serious entrepreneur instead of a billionaire's plaything. Why wouldn't she buy it? Alexander nodded slowly. Make the calls. Set up the narrative. As Janet rushed out to implement the strategy, Alexander turned back to me. That was good work, he said. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You're still in PR because you don't know how to handle the truth. The dismissal stung, but I understood now. This wasn't about punishment or jealousy. It was about trust. He was teaching me to manage information, to control narratives, to choose what truth to tell when. Skills I'd need to have if I ever wanted back into his inner circle. Skills I'd definitely need to complete Victoria's contract. Mr. Sterling? I paused at his office door. For what it's worth, I hope the business partnership works out. Madison's smart. She could build something impressive with the right backing. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe even approval. We'll see, he said. 3 weeks into my PR education, I learned 2 important things first. I was good at crisis management. Second, I was running out of time. Victoria Sterling called me on a Tuesday, her voice sharp with impatience. My son is thriving, she said without preamble. The Madison Cross partnership announcement boosted Sterling's stock price 12%. He's been featured in Forbes as the CEO who thinks like a pop star. This is the opposite of heartbroken. I was sitting in my studio apartment, eating leftover Chinese takeout and reviewing social media metrics for a client's product launch. The $5 million sat untouched in my savings account, earning interest while I tried to figure out how to earn it. The contract specified that I make him fall for me first, I said. That takes time. You have 2 weeks. After that, I find someone else to finish the job. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then at my laptop screen full of engagement, analytics, and sentiment tracking. 2 weeks to seduce and destroy Alexander Sterling. 2 weeks to earn $10 million. Or 2 weeks to figure out how to give it back without ending up in breach of contract. The next morning, I volunteered for the Sterling Foundation Gala project. It's a nightmare assignment, Janet warned me. 600 guests, 50 major donors, live streaming, and a surprise musical performance. Plus, Sterling wants everything coordinated with the Madison Cross partnership announcement. I can handle it. Janet gave me a look that suggested she thought I was insane, but she handed over the files. 300 pages of guest lists, security protocols, media schedules, and vendor contracts. The event's in 10 days, she said. Try not to destroy the Sterling family reputation in the process. The Sterling Foundation Gala was Alexander's personal project, an annual fundraiser for educational programs in underserved communities. Which meant he was personally involved in every detail, from the menu selection to the lighting design. Which meant I'd be working directly with him for the first time since my return. Our first planning meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in the conference room adjacent to his office. I arrived 15 minutes early with color-coded binders and a detailed timeline that accounted for every minute of the event. Alexander walked in at exactly 3 o'clock, followed by Madison and 2 people I didn't recognize. Ivy, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Meet David Chen, Madison's business manager, and Sarah Kim, her brand director. They'll be coordinating the partnership announcement. I shook hands professionally, ignoring the way Madison studied me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Let's start with the timeline, I said, opening my binder. Cocktail hour begins at 7, dinner at 8:30. Program starts at 9:15. The partnership announcement is scheduled for 9:45, right before Madison's performance. About that, Madison interrupted. I want to change the song. Alexander looked up from his notes. We've been rehearsing Golden for 3 weeks. Golden is too obvious. I want to do Build Something Beautiful instead. It ties better to the business partnership theme. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Build Something Beautiful was Madison's most romantic ballad, the kind of song that would have 600 people convinced they were watching a love story, not a business deal. The acoustics are calibrated for Golden, I said. Changing songs now means recalibrating sound, lighting, camera angles, so recalibrate them, Madison said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alexander was watching me carefully. What's your professional recommendation, Ivy? This was the moment. I could recommend the song change, help Madison muddy the waters between business and personal, contribute to the kind of romantic speculation that might actually make Alexander fall for her. Or I could do my job. Golden serves the strategic narrative better, I said. It's aspirational without being romantic. Build Something Beautiful will generate the wrong kind of media coverage. Madison's smile sharpened. What kind of coverage would that be? The kind that focuses on your relationship status instead of your business acumen. Maybe I don't mind people thinking Alex and I are together. The conference room went very quiet. Alexander's expression was unreadable, but I caught the slight tension in his shoulders. The goal is to establish you as a serious entrepreneur, I said evenly. Romance rumors undermine that objective. Unless the romance is real, Madison said, reaching over to squeeze Alexander's hand. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice professional. Real or not, it's off strategy for the launch. David, what's your take on the media implications? Madison's business manager cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ivy's right. We want business coverage, not gossip columns. Madison's grip on Alexander's hand tightened. Alex? It's your event. Alexander looked at me for a long moment. Then, Golden stays in the program. Madison's smile faltered, but she nodded graciously. Of course. You know best. As the meeting continued, I caught Alexander watching me with something that might have been approval. Or calculation. After the others left, he lingered behind. That was well handled, he said. Thank you. Madison's not used to being told no. Most people in her position aren't. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn when we were together. Is that why you think I'm with her? Because she doesn't challenge me? The question caught me off guard. I think you're with her because she makes sense on paper. And what made sense about you? The conversation was veering into dangerous territory, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. Nothing. That was the problem. Was it? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and stepped back. The flowers for the centerpieces, he said, back to business. Margaret mentioned you had concerns about the supplier. The moment was gone, but the tension lingered as we reviewed vendor contracts and security protocols. Working with Alexander again felt like muscle memory. I anticipated his questions, caught his concerns before he voiced them, streamlined his decision-making process. It felt like coming home to a house you'd burned down yourself. The Sterling Foundation Gala was 6 days away when everything started unraveling. It began with a phone call from Janet at 6 in the morning. Turn on Channel 7, she said without preamble. Now. I fumbled for my remote, still half asleep. The morning news was running a story about questionable donations to the Sterling Foundation, specifically contributions from companies with pending environmental violations. Sources suggest that Sterling Industries may be using charitable donations to obscure regulatory scrutiny of their construction practices. My blood went cold. How bad is this? Bad enough that 3 major sponsors have already pulled out of the gala. The Times is running a follow-up story this afternoon. I was already pulling on clothes, my mind racing through damage control options. What's our response strategy? That's what we need to figure out. Emergency meeting in 20 minutes. The crisis room felt like a war zone. Janet, Alexander, Madison, and 2 lawyers I'd never met huddled around a conference table covered with legal documents and media transcripts. The Foundation's books are clean, one of the lawyers was saying. But the optics are terrible. 3 donors do have EPA violations pending, but their contributions represent less than 2% of our total funding. 2%, that's about to torpedo the entire event, Madison said. She looked tense, her usual polish cracked around the edges. My brand can't be associated with environmental cover-ups. Alexander's jaw was tight. No one's asking you to be associated with anything. The Foundation has operated transparently for 5 years. Then why does the Times have internal emails suggesting otherwise? The question hung in the air like toxic gas. Someone had leaked confidential communications to make the Foundation look dirty. This wasn't random, this was targeted. Who has access to Foundation email servers? I asked. One of the lawyers consulted his notes. Board members, senior staff, and anyone with administrative privileges. That's about 30 people, Janet said. Could be anyone. I thought about the timing 6 days before the gala, right when media attention was highest. Or it could be someone who wants maximum damage to the Sterling reputation. Alexander looked at me sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting someone orchestrated this. The question is whether they want to destroy the Foundation, Sterling Industries, or you personally. Madison stood abruptly. I need to call my team. Figure out how to distance myself from this mess. Madison, Alexander started. No. Her voice was firm. I won't let your family drama sink my brand launch. I'm sorry, Alex, but I have to protect myself. She left without looking back. Alexander stared after her, his expression unreadable. Sir, Janet said gently, we need to make some decisions about the gala. Such as? Cancel it, postpone it, or fight back publicly. Those are our options. I found myself speaking before I'd fully formed the thought. What if we do something else? Everyone looked at me. What if we use the gala to prove the accusations wrong? Open book event. Live stream the financial presentations. Turn transparency into a selling point instead of a liability. Alexander's eyes sharpened. Explain. Instead of running from the controversy, we embrace it. Make the entire evening about accountability and transparency. Show donors exactly where their money goes. Bring in beneficiaries to speak about program impact. Let media audit our books in real time. That's incredibly risky, one of the lawyers said. If there's any irregularity we've missed, then we find it first and address it, I said. Better to control the narrative than let someone else write it. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, what would you need to make that work? Full access to Foundation records, 3 days to audit everything, and total authority to restructure the event program. Done. Janet blinked. Sir, are you sure? Ivy's right. We fight back. Alexander stood. Cancel all other meetings. Miss. Quick tongue, you have 72 hours to save the Sterling Foundation. As the room emptied, Alexander caught my arm. This is a hell of a risk, he said quietly. I know. If you're wrong, it destroys everything I've built. I know that too. He studied my face. Why are you doing this? The honest answer was complicated, part professional pride, part guilt over Victoria's contract, part desperate need to prove I wasn't the person who'd walked away when things got difficult. Because it's the right thing to do, I said. For the first time in weeks, Alexander smiled. Then let's do it right. I spent the next 3 days living in the Sterling Foundation's financial records. Every donation, every expenditure, every email and contract and receipt. Janet assigned me 2 junior analysts and unlimited coffee, then left me alone to work. What I found wasn't corruption, it was sloppiness. The foundation was clean, but their documentation was scattered across multiple systems. Donor communications lived in one database, financial records in another, program outcomes in a third. It wasn't illegal, but it was messy enough to look suspicious if you only saw pieces of the picture. Hanlon's razor, I muttered to myself, cross-referencing a $50,000 donation against the corresponding program expenditure. What's that? Asked Kyle, one of the analysts. Never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by incompetence. I highlighted another inconsistency. The foundation isn't hiding anything, they're just bad at organization. So whoever leaked those emails cherry-picked the most confusing transactions and presented them out of context. I pulled up the email threads the Times had published. Look at this. They quoted an email about managing the Peterson situation, but didn't include the previous message, explaining that Peterson was a program beneficiary having trouble with housing assistance. That's not accidental, Kyle said. No, it's not. I made another note on my growing list of clarifications. Someone with access to these systems wanted to make the foundation look dirty. The question was who? On Thursday evening, 18 hours before the gala, I presented my findings to Alexander in his office. I'd prepared a 40-page report with supporting documentation, but I started with the bottom line. The foundation is clean, I said. Completely, verifiably clean. Every donation is properly documented. Every expenditure is program-related. Every outcome is measurable. Relief flickered across Alexander's face. And the leaked emails? Selectively edited to create a false narrative. I can prove it. I opened my laptop and pulled up a side-by-side comparison. Here's what the Times published versus the full email thread with context. Alexander leaned forward, studying the screen. This makes us look incompetent instead of corrupt. Exactly. And incompetence is fixable. Tomorrow night, we show everyone how we fixed it. How? I turned to a fresh page in my presentation. Complete financial transparency. Every guest gets access to a real-time dashboard showing foundation finances. Every program gets a representative speaking about impact. Every donation gets traced from source to outcome. That's ambitious. It's necessary. We're not just defending the foundation anymore, we're setting a new standard for nonprofit accountability. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then, what about Madison? Is she back in? I'd been dreading this question. Madison had called off the partnership announcement that morning, citing reputational concerns. Her team had made it clear she wouldn't be attending the gala. She's protecting her brand, I said carefully. I can't blame her for that. Can't you? There was something sharp in Alexander's voice. She's abandoning us when we need support most. The way I did when I quit? Alexander went very still. Is that what you think happened? Isn't it? We stared at each other across his desk. 3 months of unspoken accusations hung in the air between us. You didn't quit because I needed support, Alexander said finally. You quit because you were afraid of needing mine. The observation hit like a physical blow. I thought about Victoria's contract, about the money sitting in my account, about all the ways I'd convinced myself that leaving him had been noble instead of cowardly. Maybe, I said. Maybe? Maybe I was afraid of a lot of things. Alexander's expression softened slightly. Such as? Before I could answer, his office door opened. Margaret stuck her head in, looking harried. Mr. Sterling? I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Times is on line 1. They want a comment on tomorrow's event. Alexander looked at me. Ready to go public is less than #0. 6# is greater than. I thought about the audit, the evidence, the risk we were taking. Then I thought about the foundation's beneficiaries, kids who needed educational programs, communities that relied on Sterling's support. Ready, I said. Alexander picked up the phone. This is Alexander Sterling. Yes, I have a comment about tomorrow's gala. The Sterling Foundation Gala was supposed to start at 7. By 6:30, the Metropolitan Museum's main hall buzzed with an energy that felt more like anticipation than celebration. I stood in the wings, headset on, clipboard in hand, watching 600 of New York's most powerful people mingle beneath the soaring ceilings. The transparency initiative had worked. Media coverage had shifted from Sterling Foundation scandal to nonprofit accountability revolution. Ivy. Alexander's voice crackled through my earpiece. Status report. All systems green, I replied, scanning the room. Financial dashboard is live. Speaker presentations are loaded. Media setup is complete. And you? The question caught me off guard. What about me? How are you holding up? Through the crowd, I spotted Alexander near the main entrance, elegant in his tuxedo, greeting guests with the easy confidence that had first attracted me. He looked nothing like the heartbroken man Victoria had described. I'm fine, I said. Liar? Despite everything, I smiled. 5 minutes to opening remarks. Copy that. And Ivy? Thank you. For all of this, I watched him disconnect and move toward the podium, then returned my attention to the logistics board. Everything was running perfectly, which meant I was running out of reasons to avoid thinking about what came next. Tomorrow, Victoria would expect an update on my progress. In 10 days, my 2-week deadline would expire. I'd spent a month earning Alexander's trust instead of breaking his heart, and I was no closer to completing her contract. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander's voice filled the hall as he took the podium. Welcome to an evening of radical transparency. The room quieted, hundreds of faces turning toward the stage. I found myself holding my breath. 3 days ago, allegations were made about this foundation's integrity, Alexander continued. Tonight, instead of defending ourselves with words, we're opening our books completely. Every donation, every expenditure, every outcome available in real time on the tablets at your tables. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was unprecedented for a charity gala. But transparency isn't just about numbers, Alexander said. It's about trust. And trust, once broken, must be earned back through actions, not promises. His eyes found mine across the room. Tonight, you'll hear directly from the communities we serve. You'll see exactly how your support creates change. And you'll decide for yourselves whether the Sterling Foundation deserves your continued confidence. Applause erupted. I felt tears prick my eyes, though I couldn't say why. The next 2 hours unfolded flawlessly. Students from foundation-funded programs spoke about educational opportunities. Community leaders presented measurable outcomes. Financial analysts walked donors through the live dashboard, showing precisely how contributions flowed to programs. By 9 o'clock, the mood had shifted from skeptical to celebratory. Social media buzzed with praise for the foundation's openness. 3 major donors who'd withdrawn pledged to double their contributions. I was coordinating the evening's final presentation when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Beautiful work tonight. But you're running out of time. V. Victoria. Somehow, she'd gotten my personal number. My hands shook as I typed back, need more time. He's not falling for the obvious approaches. The response came immediately. Then try less obvious ones. 10 days, Ivy. Or I find someone who can finish the job. Ivy? Janet appeared at my elbow. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile and pocketed my phone. Just tired. Long week. Tell me about it. But hey, look around. This is a triumph. Alexander's brilliant for trusting you with this. Trust. The word felt like a knife between my ribs. The gala ended at 11 with a standing ovation and commitments for over $12 million in new donations. As guests filtered out, I supervised the breakdown crew with mechanical efficiency, my mind churning through Victoria's ultimatum. Ivy. Alexander appeared beside me as I checked off the last item on my logistics list. Walk with me? The museum after hours felt different, quieter, more intimate. Our footsteps echoed as we moved through galleries filled with ancient artifacts and priceless art. That was extraordinary, Alexander said. The Transparency Initiative, the financial dashboard, the community presentations. You single-handedly saved the foundation. It was a team effort. It was your vision. He stopped walking, turning to face me. I owe you an apology. For what? For testing you these past few weeks. The PR assignment, the Madison situation, even tonight I was trying to see if you'd run again when things got complicated. My chest tightened. And your conclusion? You didn't run. You stayed and fought for something you believed in, even when it would have been easier to walk away. His voice was soft in the dim gallery lighting. The woman I fell in love with would have done exactly the same thing. Would have. Past tense. As if that woman was gone. Alex, I know you're going to say it's complicated, he interrupted. That we still have issues to work through. That trust takes time to rebuild. And you're right. But tonight proved something to me. What? He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. That we're better together than apart. That whatever drove you away before, we can fix it if we try. This was it. The moment Victoria had paid me to create Alexander, vulnerable, open, ready to fall completely. All I had to do was say yes, let him believe we could work, then destroy him when he was most invested. $10 million for breaking the heart of the man I'd never stopped loving. I can't, I whispered. Alexander's face shuddered. Why not? The truth sat on my tongue like poison. I thought about Victoria's contract, about the money in my account, about all the ways I'd rationalize taking a job that required me to hurt someone I cared about. Because I'm not who you think I am. What does that mean? I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd trusted me with his foundation, his reputation, his heart. The man who'd spent weeks testing my integrity while I planned his destruction. It means I need to tell you something. About why I really came back. We ended up in Alexander's office at 2 a.m. The building was empty except for security, the city lights painting everything in silver and shadow through his floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat across from his desk with Victoria's contract in my hands. The pages that had seemed so straightforward 6 weeks ago, now feeling like evidence of a crime. Your mother hired me, I said without preamble. Alexander looked up from pouring himself a scotch. Hired you for what? To seduce you and then break your heart. Completely. Permanently. I placed the contract on his desk. $10 million to make you never trust love again. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the building's ventilation system. Alexander set down his glass without drinking, his face carefully blank. Show me, he said. I pushed the contract across the desk. Watched him read through the terms, the payment schedule, the detailed instructions for emotional manipulation. His expression never changed, but I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the pages. 5 million up front, he said finally. 5 million on completion. Signed 6 weeks ago. He looked up at me. The day after you came back to work. Yes. So everything since then has been theater. The PR work, the foundation crisis. Tonight, all of it was you setting up the final betrayal. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. I mean, it started that way, but what? Alexander's voice was arctic. But you decided to take your time? Enjoy the process of destroying me? But I couldn't do it. I leaned forward, desperate for him to understand. Alex, I've had dozens of opportunities to hurt you these past weeks. I could have sabotaged the Madison partnership, leaked information during the foundation crisis, made you look foolish tonight. Instead, I protected you. Every single time. How noble of you. The sarcasm cut deep, but I pressed on. The money is still in my account. Untouched. Because the moment I started working with you again, I remembered why I fell in love with you in the first place. Alexander stood, pacing to the window. Which was what, exactly? My wealth? My connections? My usefulness to your career? Your brilliance, I said quietly. The way you see problems 3 steps ahead of everyone else. How you built something meaningful instead of just profitable. The fact that you remembered my coffee order after one conversation and my birthday after I mentioned it once. He turned back to me. And yet you were willing to destroy me for money. I was willing to try. There's a difference. Is there? I thought about the past 6 weeks, the late nights working on foundation projects, the way Alexander had smiled when I'd suggested the transparency initiative, how he'd trusted me with something that mattered to him. Yes, I said. Because I failed. Spectacularly. Instead of making you vulnerable, I fell in love with you all over again. Alexander was quiet for a long time, studying the contract in his hands. Why are you telling me this? He asked eventually. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because I'm giving the money back? All of it? All of it. With interest. Alexander set the contract down carefully. What about my mother? She'll just find someone else to finish the job. Then we deal with that together. If you want to. If I want to. Alexander's laugh was bitter. Ivy, you just confessed to accepting payment to emotionally manipulate me. Why would I want anything to do with you? The question hung between us like a challenge. I could give him the easy answer that I'd changed, that love had conquered greed, that we were meant to be together despite everything. Instead, I gave him the truth. Because I'm the only person who's ever seen you clearly enough to hurt you this badly, I said. Which means I'm also the only person who understands exactly what you're worth. Alexander stared at me. That's your pitch? That you're qualified to love me because you're qualified to destroy me? I'm saying I know the difference between Alexander Sterling the brand and Alex the man. I know that you put on classical music when you're stressed, that you always order the same sandwich from the deli downstairs, that you worry you're not living up to your father's legacy even though you've already surpassed it. I stood, moving closer to his desk. I know that you test people because you're afraid of being disappointed. That you keep everyone at arm's length because you'd rather be lonely than betrayed. And I know that underneath all of that careful control, you want someone to see you completely and choose you anyway. And you think that someone is you? I think I'm the person who saw you completely and chose money instead. Which makes me the last person who should be asking for another chance. I picked up the contract. But I'm asking anyway. Alexander was quiet for so long, I thought he might not respond at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I need time to think. Of course. And I need you to understand something, Ivy. Trust isn't just about love. It's about judgment. And your judgment was to take money to destroy me. The words hit like physical blows, but I nodded. I understand. Do you? Because even if I could forgive the betrayal, how do I trust someone who thought I was worth $10 million of pain? I had no answer for that. Alexander walked me to his office door, his manner politely distant. I'll have accounting arrange the money transfer, he said. Return the $5 million to my mother. Keep the rest as payment for your work on the foundation. Alex, good night, Ivy. The door closed between us with quiet finality. I called in sick the next morning and spent the day in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen and trying to draft a resignation letter. Every version sounded either pathetic or defensive, so I gave up and called Emma instead. You did what? She screeched after I'd explained the whole sordid story. I told him the truth. The truth that you took money to break his heart and then fell in love with him instead? Ivy, that's not romantic, that's psychotic. It's honest. It's career suicide. And actual suicide. Probably, when his mother finds out you've blown her $10 million investment. I hadn't thought about Victoria's reaction. The woman who'd orchestrated this elaborate revenge plot wasn't going to take failure gracefully. I'll deal with Mrs. Sterling, I said. How? By telling her the truth too? Because that worked out so well with Alexander. Emma had a point. I'd confessed to Alexander out of guilt and love and some misguided belief that honesty would fix everything. But Victoria Sterling wasn't motivated by love, she was motivated by results. And I'd failed to deliver. My phone rang while I was contemplating the various ways Victoria might destroy my life. Unknown number. Hello? Ivy. Victoria's voice was silk over steel. I think we need to talk. We met at the same restaurant where she'd first presented me with the contract. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late, impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of cold fury that made five-star waiters nervous. You told him, she said without preamble. Yes. Why? I'd prepared for this question during the cab ride over, rehearsed various explanations that might make sense to someone like Victoria Sterling. In the end, I went with simplicity. Because I love him. Victoria's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Love. Do you have any idea how much your love has cost me? $10 million. But you can have $5 million back. I don't want the money back, you foolish girl. I want my son focused on business instead of mooning over women who aren't worthy of him. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Is that what this was about? Keeping Alexander single? This was about teaching Alexander that love is a luxury he can't afford. That trusting the wrong person can destroy everything he's built. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. And you were perfect for the job. Beautiful enough to tempt him, poor enough to be bought, weak enough to betray him for money. But I didn't betray him. No, you did something worse. You made him vulnerable and then confessed to planning his destruction. Do you think he'll ever trust anyone again after this? Do you think he'll ever risk his heart on someone who might be another hired actress? The full scope of what I'd done hit me like a physical blow. By confessing, I hadn't saved Alexander, I'd completed Victoria's mission more thoroughly than she'd dared hope. You're right, I whispered. Of course I'm right. Alexander will throw himself into work now. Avoid romantic entanglements. Focus on building the Sterling empire. Exactly as he should. Victoria stood, smoothing her designer skirt. Congratulations, Ivy. You've earned your $10 million after all. She left me sitting alone at the table, surrounded by the ruins of every good intention I'd ever had. I spent the weekend researching waste management companies. It seemed like appropriate penance, use Victoria's blood money to build something useful. By Monday morning, I'd identified 3 acquisition targets and drafted a resignation letter. Ivy? Janet looked surprised when I handed her the envelope. I thought you'd be taking a victory lap after Friday night. I'm resigning. Personal reasons. Janet's face fell. You just pulled off the PR coup of the decade. The compliment made leaving harder. I'd found something meaningful here. But staying meant watching Alexander rebuild the walls I'd helped tear down. Around noon, Margaret appeared at my cubicle. Mr. Sterling wants to see you. The walk to Alexander's office felt endless. He stood by his window, not turning when I entered. You're leaving. Yes. Because of what happened between us. Because I can't do my job effectively under the circumstances. Alexander finally faced me, looking older somehow. What if the circumstances changed? A different position, something that didn't require close collaboration. I stared at him. Why? Because you're good at what you do. The Foundation Gala proved that. He hesitated. Because whatever your motivations were initially, you saved something that mattered to me. Working at Sterling Industries while he rebuilt his defenses would be torture. I appreciate the offer, but it's better if I go. Alexander nodded as if he'd expected that. Where will you go? I'm starting my own company. Recycling. Something flickered across his face. With what capital? We both knew the answer. The money from your mother, I said. Since I apparently earned it after all. His expression hardened. Did she tell you that? She explained that confessing accomplished her goals more effectively than the original plan. And you believe her? I met his eyes. You'll never trust anyone the way you trusted me. She won. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. What kind of recycling operation? I pulled up my research. Mixed stream processing, plastics sorting, contamination reduction. Clean flake and pellet products for manufacturing. Market size? $6 billion annually, growing 8% year over year. Alexander moved to his desk, pulling out a legal pad. Startup costs? 12 to 15 million for equipment and facilities. You have that kind of money? Enough to get started. Alexander scribbled notes, then looked up. I want to make you an offer. An investment offer. Sterling provides remaining capital, facility connections, corporate customers. You provide operational expertise. You want to invest in my company? I want to offer partnership. 50-50. Why would you do that? Alexander set down his pen. Because you see me clearly. Including the part that knows a good business opportunity. The offer was generous and potentially catastrophic. But it was also a chance to build something real with Victoria's tainted money. I'll need to see terms. Alexander smiled for the first time since I'd entered. Janet tells me you're working through the week. That gives us time for our lawyers to draft an agreement. This is a terrible idea. Probably. But it's the only way either of us finds out who we really are when money and manipulation are off the table. 6 months later, I stood in a converted warehouse in Long Island City, watching our optical sorting system process 2 tons of mixed recycling. The facility hummed with purposeful efficiency. Pet Clearflake yield is up to 92%, Mike called over the machinery noise. Contamination under 50 parts per million. We'd struggled to hit 80% for the first 3 months. The breakthrough came when I'd figured out our intake sorting was missing pre-wash contamination removal. Mr. Sterling's here for the monthly review, Jenny announced. 6 months of professional partnership had established our rhythm, cordial, efficient, carefully bounded. We met monthly to review metrics and discuss expansion. We never talked about anything personal. Alexander stood near the optical sorters wearing safety glasses and a hard hat, deep in conversation with Mike about throughput rates. He'd actually read the technical reports I sent him. Ivy, he said when he spotted me. Mike was explaining how you solved the contamination issue. Impressive work. Team effort, I said automatically. The numbers reflect it. 92% yield puts you in the top tier nationally. Alexander had changed over the past 6 months, more focused, more driven. But there were moments when I caught glimpses of the man I'd fallen in love with. In my office, Alexander settled into his usual chair. Quarterly review looks strong. Revenue up 40%, margins improving, customer satisfaction in the high 90s. We're still small. 10,000 tons annually. We need 50,000 to compete with major players. Which brings us to expansion. Alexander pulled out a folder. I have a proposal. The architectural drawings showed a facility 3 times our current size. $30 million in capital investment, 60,000 tons capacity. This is ambitious. It's necessary. The market's consolidating. In 5 years, there will be 3 major players on the East Coast, or dozens of struggling operations fighting for scraps. And you think we can be one of the 3? Alexander leaned forward. I think you've built something worth scaling. The question is whether you're ready to take that risk. The expansion would require us to work much more closely together, to trust each other with something bigger than either could handle alone. What would the partnership structure look like? 50-50 ownership, shared operational control, equal board representation. Alexander paused. Full transparency on all financial and strategic decisions. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no contracts signed behind each other's backs. I'll need time to think about it. Of course. But Ivy? Alexander stood, collecting his files. Whatever happened between us personally, professionally, you've proven yourself. This offer isn't charity, it's recognition of what you've accomplished. After he left, I stared at the expansion plans. The facility would create 40 new jobs, process enough material to offset thousands of tons of virgin plastic production, establish us as a major player. It would also mean betting my future on a partnership with a man I'd betrayed, who'd never fully trust me again, but who still believed in my ability to build something worthwhile. The next morning, I called Alexander's office. I'm in. Let's build something beautiful. The expansion project consumed the next 8 months. Alexander and I worked together more closely than we had since our relationship ended, reviewing plans, negotiating contracts, coordinating with regulators, managing construction. Is less than #0. 6# is greater than it should have been awkward. Instead, it felt natural. We developed a rhythm that maximized our strengths. Alexander handled negotiations and regulatory approvals. I focused on operational design and team building. He secured corporate contracts I hired and trained the workforce. Slowly, we began to trust each other again professionally. When Alexander said he'd handle permits, I knew they'd be filed correctly. When I promised specific yield rates, he based projections on those numbers without hedging. The trust we'd lost as lovers, we rebuilt as business partners. The new facility opened in March in a converted automotive plant in Newark. Our first day processed 800 tons, producing clean flake at 95% yield. Media covered the opening. Everyone wanted to interview the unlikely partnership between the corporate titan and the entrepreneur who'd revolutionized East Coast recycling. What none of them knew was that we'd barely spoken outside business meetings for over a year. Congratulations, Victoria said, settling into my office chair with familiar elegance. I understand your venture is quite successful now. I looked up from quarterly reports, my stomach dropping. She was immaculately dressed, but something was different, less coldly controlled, more genuinely curious. Mrs. Sterling. I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to see what $10 million had purchased. 42 employees, 60,000 tons capacity, contracts with 7 manufacturers. Quite an operation. Alexander built it. I just manage operations. Victoria's smile was sharp. How modest. though my son would disagree. He speaks highly of your business acumen in board meetings. The implication hung between us. Alexander talked about me, about our work, despite everything. Why are you here, Mrs. Sterling? To offer you a job. Executive Vice President of Sustainability Operations. Direct report to Alexander. $2 million annually. I stared at her. 18 months ago, you paid me to break your son's heart. 18 months ago, I thought love was Alexander's weakness. I've concluded it might be his strength if he chooses the right partner. Victoria fixed me with the same calculating stare that had launched this mess. Alexander has become more focused since your confession, yes, but also more isolated. He trusts his business instincts but questions his personal judgment. He builds walls instead of relationships. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted was a son who wouldn't be destroyed by the wrong woman. What I have is a son so afraid of trusting the wrong person that he won't risk trusting anyone. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. You've spent the past year proving your worth through actions. You've built something meaningful with money meant to cause pain. You've earned back his professional respect. So your offering me a promotion is less than #0. 6# is greater than. I'm offering you a chance to show Alexander that some risks are worth taking. That some partnerships transcend business. Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. The position is real. The board approved it this morning. Alexander doesn't know yet. I wanted to speak with you first. That evening, I stared at Victoria's formal job offer. A role that would put me back in Alexander's inner circle, responsible for strategic decisions. A role that would force us to confront whatever still existed between us. My phone buzzed. Can we meet tomorrow? Something important to discuss. Alexander, in 18 months of working together, we'd never shared a meal outside a conference room. Of course. Your office or mine? Neither. Dinner. Somewhere we can talk privately. Okay. Where? Il Buco. 8 o'clock. Il Buco. Where he'd taken me for our first real date, back when we were Alexander and Ivy instead of Mr. Sterling and Miss. Quick dung. Il Buco looked exactly the same: dim lighting, exposed brick, intimate atmosphere. I arrived early and found Alexander waiting at a corner table, studying the wine list with his usual focus. He looked up when I approached, rising to pull out my chair. Thank you for coming. Of course. How was your day? Interesting. I had an illuminating conversation with my mother about job offers and meddling mothers and second chances. Alexander's smile was wry. She told me she offered you the EVP position. She did. And? I set down my menu, meeting his eyes. I haven't given her an answer yet. Why not? The question was casual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. This conversation mattered to him beyond business. Because I wanted to talk to you first. To understand what you want, not what your mother thinks you should want. Alexander turned his wine glass in slow circles. When he looked up, his expression was more open than I'd seen in months. Do you know what I've learned this past year and a half? What? That trust isn't binary. It's something you build, piece by piece, decision by decision, day by day. I thought about our partnership, the gradual way we'd learn to rely on each other again. The recycling plant. Every time you delivered on a promise, every time you solved a problem I couldn't, every time you put business first instead of personal feelings, you were rebuilding something I thought was permanently broken. Alexander leaned forward. I know why you took my mother's money, Ivy. You were scared of needing me, scared of being dependent, scared of not being enough. I understand that now. Understanding and forgiving are different things. Are they? He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. Because I think what you did, confessing when you could have disappeared with the money, took more courage than I gave you credit for. The touch sent electricity up my arm. I'd forgotten how warm his hands were. Alexander, you asked what I want. I want to offer you the EVP position myself, because you've earned it. I want to build something bigger than either of us could create alone. And I want to see if we can be partners in more than just business. My heart hammered. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. Still. Despite everything. Because of everything. His grip tightened. Watching you transform my mother's blood money into something meaningful taught me more about who you really are than any words could have. I hurt you. You did. And then you spent 18 months proving that wasn't who you wanted to be. Tears pricked my eyes. What if I hurt you again? What if you don't? Alexander lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my palm. What if we're brave enough to find out? The server appeared. We ordered without looking at the menu, too focused on each other. So, Alexander said, the EVP position. Are you interested? That depends. On what? I took a breath, gathering courage. On whether my boss would have a problem with me being completely, hopelessly in love with him. Alexander's smile was brilliant. I think your boss might have the same problem. Might? Definitely. Absolutely. Without question. He raised his wine glass. 2 partnerships. Business and otherwise. I clinked my glass against his. To second chances. To building something beautiful. Epilogue 2 years later, the Sterling Quickdung Recycling Center processed its millionth ton on a Tuesday in October. I stood on the observation deck watching our newest sorting line handle Manhattan's mixed load, optical scanners, identifying materials with 98% accuracy. Penny for your thoughts, Alexander said, joining me at the railing. Just thinking about how far we've come. I leaned into his warmth. 2 years ago, I was plotting to break your heart for money. Now we're processing 1 million tons annually, and engaged. Alexander's arm tightened around me. Technically, we were engaged 2 years ago too. You just didn't know it yet. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket, the same box I'd found him staring at, the day after I'd confessed everything. I bought this the week before you quit. I was planning to propose at the foundation gala. My breath caught. You were going to propose? Even after everything? Because of everything. Because you'd stayed when things got difficult. Because you'd fought for something that mattered to me. I touched the ring I now wore, remembering when he'd finally given it to me 6 months ago during a late work session. The gala, I said. You were going to propose, and instead I confessed to taking money to destroy you. Best plot twist ever. Alexander grinned. Ivy, if you'd said yes that night, we would have built a marriage on incomplete trust. We needed the breakdown to create something stronger. Below us, employees moved through their shifts. Former waste emerged as clean flake ready for manufacturing. Something useful from something discarded. Your mother called this morning, I said. Please tell me she's not planning another elaborate manipulation. She wants to discuss European expansion. She thinks we could revolutionize recycling globally. Alexander groaned. My mother, the environmental activist. She's also insisting on planning our wedding. Something about proper Sterling family traditions. Absolutely not. We're eloping. We are not eloping. I want the dress, the flowers, the ceremony where everyone can see how ridiculously happy we are. Alexander turned me in his arms. Are you? Ridiculously happy? I thought about the question honestly. 2 years ago, I'd been a broke secretary willing to betray someone I loved for money. Now I was EVP of a company that mattered, engaged to a man who saw all my flaws and loved me anyway. I'm happy. Completely, ridiculously, perfectly happy. Even though we're covered in industrial dust and discussing recycling yields, especially because of that. Alexander kissed me against the backdrop of machinery and purpose. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. So, ready to process another 1,000,000 tons? Ready to process 10 million tons? Ready to change how the world thinks about waste? Ready to build something that proves everything discarded has value if you know how to see it. Is that what we did? Built something that matters? I looked around at the facility we'd created, at the workers we employed, at the environmental impact we generated. Then I looked at Alexander, at the man who'd trusted me with his heart after I'd tried to break it. We built something better, I said. We built a partnership. We built a purpose. We built a love story that's messier and more real for having started with a lie. Alexander smiled. I love our story. Even the parts where I was the villain? Especially those parts. They make the ending better. Below us, the sorting line hummed with efficiency, transforming waste into worth, proving every day that redemption was possible, that value could be found in unexpected places, that sometimes the best things were built from what others had thrown away. Just like us. The end. Alexander has become more focused and driven since your confession, yes, but he's also become more isolated. He trusts his business instincts but questions his personal judgment. He builds walls instead of relationships. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted was a son who wouldn't be destroyed by the wrong woman. What I have is a son who's so afraid of trusting the wrong person that he won't risk trusting anyone. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced elegance. You, on the other hand, have spent the past 1.5 years proving your worth through actions rather than words. You've built something meaningful with money that was meant to cause pain. You've worked alongside the man you betrayed and earned back his professional respect. You've shown character under pressure. So you're offering me a promotion? I'm offering you a chance to show Alexander that some risks are worth taking. That some partnerships transcend business. That some trust, once broken and rebuilt, is stronger than it ever was before. Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. The position is real, Ivy. The board approved it this morning. Alexander doesn't know yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Her smile was enigmatic. What you do with the opportunity is entirely up to you. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the formal job offer Victoria had left on my desk. Executive Vice President of Sustainability Operations. A role that would put me back in Alexander's inner circle, responsible for strategic decisions and major initiatives. A role that would force us to confront whatever still existed between us. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Can we meet tomorrow? Something important to discuss. For a moment, I wondered if he'd found out about his mother's visit, about the job offer, about her latest attempt at manipulation. Then I realized it didn't matter. Victoria might have created the opportunity, but what happened next was up to Alexander and me. I typed back, of course. Your office or mine? Neither, came his reply. Dinner. Somewhere we can talk privately. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the message. In 18 months of working together, we'd never shared a meal that wasn't catered into a conference room. We'd never been alone together outside of a business context. Okay, I typed back. Where? Il Buco. 8 o'clock. Il Buco. The small Italian restaurant where he'd taken me for our first real date, back when we were Alexander and Ivy instead of Mr. Sterling and Miss. Quick tongue. I set down my phone and looked again at Victoria's job offer, at the opportunity to step back into Alexander's life in a role that mattered, that meant something, that could rebuild what we'd lost or destroy what we'd found. Tomorrow night, I'd find out which one it would be. Il Buco looked exactly the same: dim lighting, exposed brick walls, the kind of intimate atmosphere that made every conversation feel significant. I arrived 5 minutes early and found Alexander already waiting at a corner table, studying the wine list with the focus he usually reserved for quarterly projections. He looked up when I approached, rising to pull out my chair with the same old-fashioned courtesy that had charmed me during our first dinner here 2 years ago. "Thank you for coming," he said, settling back into his seat. "Of course." I picked up my menu, though I wasn't really reading it. "How was your day?" "Interesting." I had an illuminating conversation with my mother about job offers and meddling mothers and second chances. Alexander's smile was wry. "She told me she offered you the EVP position." "She did." "And?" I set down my menu, meeting his eyes across the small table. "I haven't given her an answer yet." "Why not?" The question was casual, but I could see the tension in Alexander's shoulders, the careful way he was holding himself. This conversation mattered to him in ways that went beyond business. Because I wanted to talk to you first. To understand what you want, not what your mother thinks you should want. Alexander was quiet for a moment, turning his wine glass in slow circles on the white tablecloth. When he looked up, his expression was more open than I'd seen it in months. "Do you know what I've learned this past year and a half?" he asked. "What?" That trust isn't binary. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's something you build, piece by piece, decision by decision, day by day. I thought about our partnership, about the gradual way we'd learn to rely on each other again through work. The recycling plant. The recycling plant. Every time you delivered on a promise, every time you solved a problem I couldn't, every time you put the business first instead of personal feelings, you were rebuilding something I thought was permanently broken. Alexander leaned forward, his voice soft in the restaurant's intimate lighting. "I know why you took my mother's money, Ivy. You were scared of needing me, scared of being dependent, scared of not being enough. I understand that now in ways I didn't before. Understanding and forgiving are different things." "Are they?" He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "Because I think what you did confessing when you could have just disappeared with the money took more courage than I gave you credit for." The touch of his skin against mine sent electricity up my arm. I'd forgotten how warm his hands were, how right it felt when he touched me. "Alexander, I'm not finished." His thumb traced across my knuckles. "You asked what I want. I want to offer you the EVP position myself, not because my mother manipulated the situation, but because you've earned it. I want to build something bigger than either of us could create alone. And I want to see if we can be partners in more than just business." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. Still. Despite everything. Because of everything." Alexander's grip on my hand tightened. "I'm saying that watching you transform my mother's blood money into something meaningful and useful taught me more about who you really are than any words could have. I hurt you. You did. And then you spent 18 months proving that wasn't who you wanted to be." Tears pricked my eyes. "What if I hurt you again? What if you don't?" Alexander lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my palm. "What if we're brave enough to find out?" The server appeared at our table, breaking the moment. We ordered without really looking at the menu, both of us too focused on each other to care about food. "So," Alexander said after the server left, "the EVP position. Are you interested?" "That depends." "On what?" I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "On whether my boss would have a problem with me being completely, hopelessly in love with him." Alexander's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "I think your boss might have the same problem." "Might?" "Definitely. Absolutely. Without question." He raised his wine glass. To partnerships, business and otherwise. I clinked my glass against his. To second chances. To building something beautiful. Epilogue 2 years later. The Sterling Quick-Tongue Recycling Center processed its millionth ton of material on a Tuesday in October, under gray skies that threatened rain but never delivered. I stood on the observation deck watching our newest sorting line handle a mixed load from Manhattan, the optical scanners identifying and separating materials with 98% accuracy. "Penny, for your thoughts," Alexander said, joining me at the railing. "Just thinking about how far we've come." I leaned into his warmth, still amazed sometimes that I was allowed to do that again. 2 years ago, I was plotting to break your heart for money. Now we're processing 1 million tons annually and engaged to be married. Alexander's arm tightened around me. Technically, we were engaged 2 years ago too. You just didn't know it yet. What do you mean? He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, the same box I'd found him staring at in his desk drawer the day after I'd confessed everything. The day I thought I'd lost him forever. "I bought this the week before you quit," he said, opening it to reveal the ring I now wore on my left hand. I was planning to propose at the foundation gala. My breath caught. "You were going to propose? Even after everything?" "I was going to propose because of everything. Because you'd stayed when things got difficult. Because you'd fought for something that mattered to me. Because you'd proven that love wasn't about what was easy, but about what was worth fighting for." I touched the ring, remembering the night he'd finally given it to me 6 months ago. We'd been working late on the expansion project, arguing about equipment specifications, when he'd suddenly gone quiet. "Marry me," he'd said, producing the box from seemingly nowhere. "Now?" I'd asked, covered in construction dust and holding a wrench. "Now." "Tomorrow?" "Next year. I don't care when, as long as it's you." "The gala," I said, bringing myself back to the present. "You were going to propose at the gala, and instead I confessed to taking money to destroy you." "Best plot twist ever," Alexander said solemnly, then grinned at my expression. "Ivy, if you'd said yes that night, we would have built a marriage on incomplete trust. We needed the breakdown to create something stronger. Below us, our employees moved through their shifts with practiced efficiency. Former waste that would have ended up in landfills emerged as clean flake ready for manufacturing into new products. Something useful from something discarded. "Your mother called this morning," I said. "Please tell me she's not planning another elaborate manipulation." Actually, she wanted to discuss expanding into European markets. She thinks we could revolutionize recycling on a global scale. Alexander groaned. My mother, the environmental activist. Who could have predicted that? She's also insisting on planning our wedding. Something about proper Sterling family traditions. Absolutely not. We're eloping. We are not eloping. I want the dress, the flowers, the ceremony where everyone can see how ridiculously happy we are. Alexander turned me in his arms, his expression growing serious. Are you? Ridiculously happy? I thought about the question honestly. 2 years ago, I'd been a broke secretary willing to betray someone I loved for money. Now I was the EVP of a company that mattered, engaged to a man who saw all my flaws and loved me anyway, building something that would outlast both of us. I'm happy, I said. Completely, ridiculously, perfectly happy. Even though we're covered in industrial dust and discussing recycling yields on what's supposed to be a romantic moment? Especially because of that. Alexander kissed me then, soft and sure against the backdrop of machinery and purpose. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. So, he said, ready to process another 1 million tons? Ready to process 10 million tons. Ready to change how the world thinks about waste. ready to build an empire on the principle that everything discarded has value if you know how to see it. Is that what we did? Built an empire? I looked around at the facility we'd created, at the workers we employed, at the environmental impact we generated every day. Then I looked at Alexander, at the man who'd trusted me with his heart after I'd tried to break it, who'd built something beautiful with me out of the wreckage of our first attempt at love. We built something better than an empire, I said. We built a partnership. We built a purpose. We built a love story that turns out all the messier, more complicated, and more real for having started with a lie. Alexander smiled, the expression that had made me fall in love with him in the first place, that had sustained me through 18 months of careful professionalism, that promised decades more of building beautiful things together. I love our story, he said. Even the parts where I was the villain? Especially those parts. They make the ending better. Below us, the sorting line hummed with purposeful efficiency, transforming waste into worth, proving every day that redemption was possible, that value could be found in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the best things were built from what others had thrown away. Just like us. The end.